the complicated history of the Vikings. When you hear the word Viking, what pops into your mind? Is it helmet-clad warriors charging into battle with axes raised high? Or maybe rough seafarers prowling European coastlines for churches and villages to raid? While these images dominate pop culture, the real story of the Vikings is much more intriguing and, well, complicated. Today, we're peeling back the layers of Viking history to uncover what truly made them tick, from their legendary raids to their quieter moments of farming, trading, and storytelling. So sit back as we set sail for a journey through time to explore who the Vikings were, what drove their epic adventures, and why their legacy still looms so large in our imagination. Let's start with the basics. Who exactly were the Vikings? The term Viking itself is something of a misnomer. It originally referred to the act of raiding or piracy. To go Viking meant to set off on a seaborne raid. Over time, it came to describe the people who lived in Scandinavia during the late 8th to early 11th centuries. But not all Scandinavians during this period were Vikings in the raiding and plundering sense. The majority of these Norse people were farmers, herders, and craftsmen. They lived in small, self-sufficient communities ruled by chieftains. Their lives revolved around agriculture, with foods such as barley, oats, and herring forming the backbone of their diet. Yet even as they farmed and raised livestock, the sea was always nearby, a source of food, a natural road to the wider world, and a calling. The Vikings were also steeped in mythology. Norse tales of gods, giants, and epic battles weren't just entertaining. They offered explanations for life's mysteries and guided moral behavior. This rich cultural foundation would accompany the Vikings as they set out to explore new horizons. Now, let's talk about how they got from their quiet Scandinavian villages to the far reaches of the known world. The secret to their success lies in their incredible skill as shipbuilders and navigators. Viking longships are legendary for good reason. Light, fast, and incredibly versatile, they could navigate everything from open seas to shallow rivers, making them perfect for both raiding and exploration. They were symmetrical, allowing them to reverse direction quickly without turning the ship, a crucial advantage in hostile waters. Longships carried their fearsome crews to far-off places, while wider cargo ships, known as nars, transported goods like furs, timber, and precious metals across continents. And their navigational skills? Truly next level. Without modern tools like compasses, the Vikings relied on the sun, stars, and the behavior of birds to guide them. Some historians even believe they used sunstones, crystals capable of detecting sunlight through overcast skies. The Vikings weren't content to stay near Scandinavia. Oh no. These adventurers ventured far and wide, leaving their mark on much of the known world and even beyond it. Most famously, they reached North America long before Christopher Columbus. Their brief settlement in Vinland, believed to be in present-day Newfoundland, Canada, proved their pioneering spirit. In the West, they raided and eventually settled in parts of England, Ireland, and Scotland. They founded cities like Dublin, establishing thriving trade hubs that lasted well after the Viking Age. Traveling east, their explorations took them through rivers in Eastern Europe, where they became traders and mercenaries in places like modern-day Russia and Ukraine. Their reach didn't stop there. They traveled south to the Mediterranean and the Middle East, connecting with Byzantine and Islamic empires. The Vikings were traders of everything from furs to silk, creating links between distant civilizations and embedding themselves in the global economy of the time. Of course, we can't talk about the Vikings without addressing their reputation as fierce and fearsome raiders. This is where their story turns sharp-edged, quite literally. The Viking Age is often said to have begun in 793 CE, with the devastating raid on the monastery of Lindisfarne in England, a shocking and violent attack that shook medieval Europe. Viking raids weren't motivated by random bloodlust. Wealth, resources, and sometimes land drove these bloody expeditions. Hungry for the riches of gold, silver, and other tribute, they targeted monasteries and towns ill-prepared for their lightning-fast attacks. Vikings introduced a new kind of psychological warfare. Their longships allowed them to appear on shores seemingly out of nowhere, storming in before defenders could mobilize. But while the imagery of burning villages and stolen treasures persists, it's worth noting that raiding was just one dimension of Viking life. Over time, some raiders settled in the regions they attacked, becoming farmers and integral parts of local culture. Raiding may have brought the Vikings infamy, but trading and settling brought them lasting influence. As they transitioned from raiders to settlers in places like England, Ireland, and coastal France, they helped shape the cultures they encountered. The region of Normandy in France, for example, takes its name from the Norsemen who settled there. The Vikings weren't just fearsome, they were practical. They established trade routes that stretched across continents, trading goods ranging from walrus ivory in the north to fine silks from the Middle East. They brought the world to Scandinavia and delivered Scandinavian goods and ideas to the wider world. Many Viking settlements have fascinating backstories. Dublin began as a Viking settlement, eventually growing into a thriving city, a testament to the Vikings' ability to mix warrior instincts with strategic adaptability. The Vikings weren't just takers, they were also creators. Their contributions to the societies they touched went far beyond treasure and traded goods. For instance, their influence on language is undeniable. Words like berserk, sky, and even window come to us from Old Norse. In terms of governance, some historians believe that Viking assemblies called things inspired aspects of parliamentary systems later seen across Europe. Vikings were also remarkable artisans, crafting intricate jewelry, utensils, and tools from metals and wood, a legacy that endures in museums today. Even their military strategies left a mark. From their ship designs to their ruthless yet efficient battle tactics, the Vikings set standards that were studied and adapted by the cultures they came into contact with. What about life back home in the Viking villages when they weren't out raiding or exploring? Here's where Vikings challenge even more stereotypes. Viking society wasn't anarchic or lawless, it was highly organized. At its core was a social hierarchy, chieftains at the top, followed by warriors, free farmers, and thralls, slaves. What's especially interesting is the role of women in Viking society. In comparison to many contemporary cultures, Viking women enjoyed considerable freedom. Some women took part in expeditions, while legendary figures like Lagertha have been immortalized as warrior women. Daily life for most Vikings revolved around the seasons, farming in summer, surviving the harsh winter months. Their homes were long, communal halls made of wood or turf, with fire pits providing warmth and plenty of storytelling opportunities. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, or perhaps the horned helmet on your head. Contrary to popular belief, there's no historical evidence that Vikings wore horned helmets. The image was popularized in the 19th century by romanticized artworks and later opera costumes. Other stereotypes, viewing Vikings purely as savage barbarians or unthinking brutes, are equally misleading. The Vikings we've come to know through modern pop culture are dramatic caricatures. In reality, Vikings were far more complex, innovative, adaptable, and sometimes even peaceful. So what's the takeaway from the Vikings story? Courageous explorers, brutal warriors, skilled artisans, and savvy traders. They were all these things and more. The Vikings weren't just defined by the swinging of an axe, but by their ability to adapt, connect, and leave their mark on history. Their spirit of exploration, their knack for forging connections, and even their flaws reflect universal human traits that still resonate today. Their story reminds us that history isn't black and white. It's a swirling mix of myths and truths, great achievements and dark deeds. So the next time you see a Viking in a movie or think of a long ship slicing through icy waves, you'll know there's so much more beneath the surface. This is the complicated history of the Vikings, a legacy that refuses to be forgotten.